What if I told you that eating more food could actually help you lose weight? No starving, no calorie counting, just smarter food choices. Well, it's true. And in this episode, I'm going to explain how, along with 5 science-backed strategies to help make weight loss easier for you, including the preload strategy, known to reduce calorie consumption by 15 to 20%. The great thing about these strategies that I'm going to share with you is that each of them work, and you don't have to do all of them to get results, but you may want to stack a few of them depending on your goal. Make sure you stick around for tip number 5. It's probably the easiest one to implement and might be the most effective of them all. So why the focus on weight loss? Well, as I've explained in a previous video, excessive body fat, especially that fat that lies in and around our organs, is the primary driver of insulin resistance and metabolic disease. If we want to live long, healthy lives, we need to get fat out of places like our liver, pancreas, muscles, and heart. This isn't just about looking good. This is about feeling good and staying healthy for decades to come. Today's tips will work for you regardless of your motivation to lose body fat. Quick disclaimer, if you have struggled with disordered eating, we are going to be talking about strategies that help lower calorie intake without counting calories. So if this topic is a trigger for you, give this episode a miss and look after yourself, and I'll see you next week. And if you're watching on YouTube, now is certainly the time to hit like and subscribe. Thank you very much for your support. Okay, let's get into the 5 science-based strategies to make weight loss easier. Number 1, choose foods that fill you up with fewer calories. While this might seem like a very straightforward concept and something that we've all heard before, as is often the case, we need a little reminder. While calories consumed and expended, otherwise known as energy balance, is ultimately what dictates your body weight, there is clear evidence that not all foods are equal in terms of the degree of fullness that you feel during or between meals for a given number of calories. Fullness during a meal being satiation, and fullness between meals being satiety, terms that I'll use throughout this video. So what is it that dictates how filling a food is, if not the number of calories it contains? Well, while this is still an open question, researchers like Dr. Barbara Rolls and Dr. Kevin Hall have spent their careers trying to answer this with precision. From their work, it appears that one of the biggest characteristics of food that affects how filling it is per calorie seems to be energy density, or put simply, calories per bite or per gram of food. This idea that foods that are less calorie dense, providing less calories per bite, would be better for promoting fullness for a given number of calories is not only intuitive, but has been formally tested by the scientific method. Using the scientific method to test our intuition or hypotheses? Go figure. What a great idea. If only that was valued on Instagram and TikTok. I digress. Coming back, for example, in 1998, Dr. Rolls had healthy male subjects consume one of 3 different glasses of milk, 300 mils, 450 mils, or 600 mils, prior to eating a meal. While the macronutrients and palatability of the milk were the same, the difference was that water had been added to varying degrees to increase the volume and thus lower calorie density. Subsequent energy intake at lunch and dinner was significantly lower following the consumption of the 600 ml glass of milk, despite providing the same number of calories. So perhaps the answer is to just have a big glass of water with our meal. Well, not exactly. Rolls and her team went on to formally test this a year later, this time in healthy women. They had subjects come in for a full day of eating in a metabolic ward, and before lunch had them either consume a chicken and rice casserole, a chicken and rice casserole with a 10-ounce glass of water, 300 mils, or the same chicken rice casserole turned into a soup with the same volume of water. Energy intake was about 25% or 100 calories less, and subjects rated themselves as less hungry in the group who consumed the soup compared to both of the other groups. Rolls concluded, and I quote, "This indicated that water can have a greater impact on satiety when incorporated into a food, thereby reducing its energy density, than when consumed as a beverage along with a food." End quote. Perhaps this is one of the reasons that whole foods like fruits and vegetables are so health promoting. Particularly when compared to ultra-processed foods, they contain much more water. So what's going on here? Well, it's thought that when food is less energy dense, it moves through our digestive tract more slowly, thus stimulating stretch receptors that send signals via both nerves and hormones to your brain that say, yo, slow down, we're good here for a while. Put simply, when you eat a large number of calories per bite, as is often the case with ultra-processed foods, it's easier to eat more calories before your brain tells you to stop eating. A leading hypothesis that explains this comes from Dr. Barbara Roll's work on energy density. Unprocessed foods generally contain less calories per bite. They are less energy dense. And as a result, these foods are slower to move through the stomach and small intestine and stimulate stretch receptors in the gut for longer, providing a stronger signal to the brain that you do not need more food. As Dr. Rolls puts it, and I quote, "Since people tend to eat a consistent weight of food, when the energy density of the available foods is reduced, energy intake is reduced," end quote. So what does all of this mean practically for you? At a high level, this means eating less hyper-palatable, ultra-processed foods like sweetened breakfast cereals, soft drinks, cookies, cakes, biscuits, lollies, ice cream, chocolates, typically found in colorful packaging. And that includes many of the trendy, healthy-looking ones that have hit the shelves in recent years. And instead, eating more fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, fish, eggs, dairy, and lean cuts of meat. This is no doubt one of the main reasons you'll see people in both the low carb and keto and high carb plant-based worlds who focus on whole or minimally processed foods share their experience of adopting their respective diets and losing weight successfully. One of the major commonalities is that either way you go, there's a big drop in energy density and calories per bite. And with that, you get restoration of normal satiety mechanisms. It's not perfect and doesn't work for everyone to the same extent, which is why drugs like GLP-1 agonists have become popular. For some people, no matter the dietary changes they make, their appetite is so dysregulated that they continue to overeat calories. But it's the preload strategy from Barbara Roll's research that I really want to emphasize here for strategy number one. Dr. Roll found that getting people to eat a salad, an apple, or a water-based soup before their lunch or dinner led to 12 to 20% less calorie intake across the entire sitting. Importantly, the soup and salad were low energy dense preloads. Think water-based broth for the soup and a salad without oil-based dressing or cheese. And the apple was a whole apple cut into slices, not apple juice. So the takeaway? Starting your meal with a water-rich, low-calorie starter, like a soup, salad, or whole apple, can naturally help you eat 12 to 20% fewer calories without even noticing. I'm coming off the best 7-day sleep I've had in months, and it's no coincidence I'm back in LA with my 8 Sleep Pod 4 Ultra. It's a high-tech mattress cover that transforms your bed into a sleep optimization powerhouse. You get precise temperature control, automatic elevation, and biometric tracking, with the temperature control being my favorite feature. The pod uses machine learning to adjust the temperature throughout the night between 55 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit, helping you fall asleep faster and stay in deeper sleep stages for longer. It even detects snoring and adjusts bed position to reduce it, something that you and perhaps your partner can benefit from. Clinical studies show the pod can improve sleep by up to an hour per night, and I've definitely noticed lower overnight heart rate, better recovery, and more energy the next day. If you care about performance and long-term health, this is a game changer. Head to 8sleep.com/theproof and use the code THEPROOF for $350 off the Pod 4 Ultra. You'll get a 30-day trial and they ship to many countries worldwide. Tip number 2, slow down. Eat your food more slowly. To cut to the chase, the take-home point from this tip is that eating foods quickly overrides your body's fullness signals, making it easy to overeat without realizing it. As Dr. Kevin Hall says, and I quote, "Studies have demonstrated that higher eating rates can result in increased overall energy intake, such that a 20% change in eating rate can impact energy intake by between 10 to 13%. End quote. Dr. Hall's interest in eating rate stems back to his 2019 study comparing unprocessed to ultra-processed foods, a study that I wrote about in my book. This study is cited a lot, and much is made of the fact that when people ate the ultra-processed diet, they ate around 500 calories more per day. And this becomes a very surface level argument against ultra processed foods. But what's really interesting lies in figure 2 of this study. Despite these diets being matched for macronutrients, sodium, fiber, energy density, subjects reporting that the foods were just as pleasant, so no major difference in palatability, and there was no difference in hunger or fullness, there was this 500 calorie per day difference between the two diets. What could possibly explain that? Well, in figure 2F, which you can see on screen now for those watching along on YouTube, we can see that the subjects were eating the ultra processed foods much more quickly, about 17 more calories per minute than the unprocessed meals. Now you might be thinking, well, duh, we would expect people to eat ultra processed foods more quickly. But remember, unlike in the real world, in this study, they actually matched the energy density of the diets, the calories per bite. Hall and colleagues hypothesized in their paper that perhaps this difference in eating rate was due to differences in texture. And I quote, perhaps the orosensory properties of the ultra-processed foods, e.g. softer food that was easier to chew and swallow, led to the observed increased eating rate and delayed satiety signaling, thereby resulting in greater overall intake, end quote. For now, while researchers try to get to the bottom of this, it seems sensible to stick to chewier and thicker foods over softer foods if you want to slow down your eating rate, and in doing so, reduce your total daily calorie intake. An example of this that's been tested is eating thick porridge instead of thinner, more ground up porridge. But it doesn't stop there. Eating rate is not only affected by the foods we put in our mouth, but the awareness or lack of awareness we have while eating. Using a smaller spoon or fork, taking smaller bites, putting down the spoon or fork between bites, and chewing food thoroughly before swallowing have all been shown to increase the perceived pleasantness of meals, meaning more enjoyment, increase post-meal fullness, and reduce calorie intake. This finding that eating slower results in less total calories consumed is not a one-off. A 2014 meta-analysis of 22 human clinical trials identified the same thing. The researchers of this paper hypothesized that there are likely a few mechanisms that explain how this works. Firstly, as mentioned earlier when talking about energy density, eating more slowly means greater stomach distension and slower gastric emptying, potentially stimulating those stretch receptors that lie in the gut for longer, which helps put the brakes on eating. Second, there is evidence that chewing and eating more slowly influences levels of satiety hormones like glucagon, like peptide 1 or GLP-1, and peptide PYY. Third, and this is where chewing slowly and really savoring the moment comes in, something my friend Patrick Drake has absolutely nailed. With research suggesting that the longer food is in contact with the mouth, the greater the interaction with the sensory systems that lead to satiation earlier in a given eating event. Moral of the story, try to eat whole or minimally processed foods that you have to chew, and be more mindful when you eat. Slow down and savor the moment. Food is to be enjoyed, ideally not mindlessly scoffed down with a giant spoon in front of the TV. Don't worry, I've been there too. And if we can slow down, while some longer studies would be nice here, the data that we do have suggests we're less likely to become overweight. Quick pause. If you're finding this information helpful so far, drop a like and share it with someone who's tried everything to lose weight. These strategies might be the missing piece. Tip number 3, feed your gut microbes. Now, this tip could have easily been to simply eat more fiber, something that we know has been time and time again associated with lower body weight and lower risk of cardiometabolic diseases. But the typical story of fiber promoting satiety by slowing down eating rate due to increased chewing, slowing down digestion, and increasing stomach distension is one that's fairly well known, and by this point of the video probably makes a lot of sense. And I know you're here for new tips and tricks, so that's what I'm going to try and provide. What's perhaps a little less discussed is that particular types of fiber, along with resistant starch and polyphenols, together referred to as prebiotics, influence calorie intake by interacting with non-human cells. our microbiome. The greatest way to increase your intake of prebiotics is to eat more whole or minimally processed plant foods. As a reminder, that's fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. All of these different plant foods contain unique types of prebiotics that feed unique species of bacteria in your gut. When you feed these gut bugs, they reward you by producing compounds known as short-chain fatty acids, like butyrate and propionate, which increase the production of GLP-1 and PYY, those appetite-suppressing hormones that I just mentioned, and at the same time, decrease the production of ghrelin, the appetite-stimulating hormone. In a way, you can think of your gut microbes like a loyal army. Feed them right, and they go to work sending in appetite-suppressing reinforcements and quietening down hunger hormones. But neglect them, and your defenses weaken, leaving cravings free to run the show. So just like eating more slowly, eating more prebiotics shifts your hormonal profile in a way that leaves you feeling fuller during and between your meals. There's also some additional evidence that prebiotics change the composition of the microbiome itself, increasing the amount of particular families of microbes, or genera for the microbiologists out there, such as bifidobacteria and akkermansia, which are more commonly found in leaner individuals. A good rule of thumb here is to try and get 30 to 35 grams of fiber per day as a minimum, and eat a wide variety of plant foods across the week, not the same 3 or 4 plants every day. Some particular plant foods to perhaps focus on if weight loss is a goal that contain beta-glucans, a specific family of prebiotics known to be particularly good at suppressing appetite between meals, are oats, barley, rye, and mushrooms. If your current fiber intake is relatively low, the average is about 15 grams per day, try to slowly increase it to 30 to 35 grams over 1 or 2 months and notice how your appetite shifts. And if you really want a good insurance policy, add a good prebiotic supplement like 38 Terra's Daily Microbiome Nutrition, which is founded by Dr. Will Bolsowitz. Daily Microbiome Nutrition, or DMN for short, contains 7 different prebiotics, including actazin and solnol in the doses used in clinical trials. Tip number 4, increase your protein intake. Yep, we're going there. As if my recent episode on Dr. Gabrielle Lyon's protein claims wasn't enough. Here we are. The ever controversial topic of protein returns to the proof. This one's interesting because the more I've thought about it, the more I'm convinced that protein influences calorie intake largely by affecting the energy density and palatability of the diet. Think about it for a moment. Foods that are naturally rich in protein, meat, fish, eggs, tofu, tempeh, etc., they're generally less energy dense than ultra-processed foods and often less engineered for overconsumption. They can be delicious, sure, but they're not designed to hit the bliss point in the way a cookie or a bag of chips is. So as a general heuristic, I think it's fair to say that eating more protein is helpful for weight loss and crucial for maintaining lean mass while losing fat. And while protein does have direct effects on appetite hormones like GLP-1, PYY, and ghrelin, I would argue that how protein is consumed, the food matrix, matters just as much, if not more. Take protein shakes, for example. I certainly use them myself. They're great for convenience and ensuring you hit your daily protein target to support exercise and recovery. And while these protein isolates will increase the production of GLP-1 and PYY to some extent, when it comes to appetite suppression and weight loss, the real power seems to lie in protein-rich whole foods. Foods that you have to chew, that digest more slowly, and that naturally displace highly processed, hyperpalatable meals or snacks. With this in mind, it makes sense that Barbara Roll's infamous casserole study, which found no difference in daily energy intake when protein was increased from 15% up to 30%, showed the result that it did, because the meals were carefully matched for energy density, appearance, and palatability. In other words, her design controlled for the very factors through which protein often reduces calorie intake in real-world settings. It highlights that protein's impact on satiety is highly context-dependent. In reality, it's probably a combination: the direct hormonal effects of protein, plus the indirect benefits of swapping out calorie-dense, low-satiety foods for meals that are slower to eat, more filling, and better for your long-term goals. The main message here is to eat more protein. Shakes are fine. I have a few scoops of Momentus's 100% plant protein per day after a workout and or between meals. But ideally, you get most of your protein from whole or minimally processed foods that are associated with good cardiometabolic health, like tofu, tempeh, lentils, chickpeas, beans, fatty fish, and or Greek yogurt, eggs, etc., depending on your dietary preferences. If you do have a protein isolate and want a little extra fullness between meals, think about pairing it with a source of fiber. For example, adding berries and chia seeds to your protein shake. This idea of fiber helping enhance the satiety effect of protein is something that I spoke about with Kevin Mackey, PhD, in a recent episode. We'll provide a link to that episode in the show notes for those who would like to learn more about this protein fiber effect. I like the idea of getting a minimum 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram per day, combined with at least 30 to 35 grams of fiber, a powerful combination for hitting the brakes on hunger. For those watching on YouTube, I have a nice image on screen right now that reiterates this point of protein plus fiber being king, which I got from Ted Neiman's new book, Satiety Per Calorie. One final thing on protein before we move on. Be careful of high protein, healthy appearing packaged foods that are actually ultra processed, hyper palatable foods in disguise. Lately, I've been thinking a lot about toxin exposure, and one thing that I've been paying close attention to is PFAS, or these so-called forever chemicals. They're found in things like non-stick cookware, waterproof clothing, food packaging, and even our drinking water, and they don't break down in the body. Research links them to endocrine disruption, metabolic issues, and perhaps even various types of cancer. I have a scientist coming on the podcast soon to unpack all of this, but in the meantime, I've been using Function Health to test my own PFAS exposure. Function is an all-in-one platform offering over 100 advanced lab tests, including tests you'll be familiar with from this show that we've spoken about, like ApoB and LP(a), and now PFAS. That is about 5 times more testing than you would get in a standard physical. Most of us have some level of PFAS in our bodies due to the environment that we live in. The question is, how much? If levels are high, testing gives you the knowledge to make changes, like filtering your water or switching to PFAS-free products. Function is easy to use with 2,000 plus lab locations across the United States and a membership that's just $499 per year. No supplements, no prescriptions, just real, unbiased health data. Head to functionhealth.com/Simon Hill to get started. That's functionhealth.com/Simon Hill to get started today. Tip number 5, reduce your eating window. Time restricted eating. Thanks to the work from Sachin Panda, PhD, we know that the average person in America, and no doubt similar in Australia and UK, etc., is eating across 15 hours per day. Basically, waking up, opening the fridge, eating some food, going about their day, and then eating all the way up to bedtime. We have pretty clear evidence that when you reduce your eating window down to 10 to 12 hours or less per day, that naturally you will consume less calories. There's also data that suggests our metabolism is most primed to handle the digestion and absorption of calories a few hours after waking and into the middle part of the day, as opposed to the later part of the day. So when we perform fasting or time-restricted eating, it's true, most of the metabolic benefit is driven by the reduction in calories consumed. But also true that some metabolic benefits are attributed to the timing of our eating window and when we eat most of our calories. With that in mind, this is another tool that you may want to experiment with or layer alongside some of these other tips. I find the eating window that suits most people, again, something that I wrote about in my book, something that is sustainable socially, is eating within a 10 to 12 hour eating window and having your largest meal at breakfast or lunch. For example, you might wake up at 6 a.m., have breakfast at 7 a.m., lunch at 1 p.m., dinner at 6 to 7 p.m., and then bed at 9 to 10 p.m., with some healthy snacks between breakfast and lunch as needed to meet your energy requirements. So there you have it. Let's quickly recap what you've learned today. 5 practical, science-based strategies that you can start using right now to make fat loss easier. Number 1, choose low energy dense foods and try the preload strategy. That means starting your meals with something like soup, salad, or a piece of fruit to help you eat less without even noticing. Tip number 2, slow down when you eat. Give your brain time to catch up with your stomach. Chew more, pause between bites, and savor the moment. In doing so, you'll likely feel full with less food. Tip number 3, feed your gut microbes by adding more prebiotic-rich foods to your plate. fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, herbs, spices. These support the hormones that help you feel satisfied and regulate appetite. Tip number 4, get enough protein. Focus on whole or minimally processed protein sources like fish, tofu, tempeh, beans, and or Greek yogurt to help you stay full and maintain muscle while losing fat. Tip number 5, shorten your eating window. Aim to eat within a 10 to 12 hour eating window each day with most of your calories earlier in the day. It's simple, sustainable, and your metabolism will thank you. What's great about these strategies, again, is that you don't need to use all 5. Even adopting just 1 or 2 can lead to noticeable changes. And the more you stack, the more powerful the effect may be, especially when these habits are maintained over time. At the end of the day, remember, losing body fat is not just about aesthetics. It's about giving yourself the best shot at long-term health. Less fat inside and around our organs means better insulin sensitivity, lower risk of chronic disease, and ultimately more years in good health. If there's one key message here, it's this: to lose weight and restore our metabolic health, we don't need to eat less. We need to eat differently. More volume, more fiber, more protein, more whole plants. Less hyperpalatable, energy-dense foods that are manufactured to hijack our taste buds and the reward systems in our brain and be easily overconsumed. Let me know in the comments, which of these 5 strategies are you going to try first? Or are you already using some of them? I'd love to hear what's working for you. There we go. I think we did it. If you found this episode helpful, consider sharing it with a friend or loved one who's also trying to improve their health. And if you'd like to dive deeper into any of the strategies I've discussed today, you'll find related episodes and references in the show notes. As always, thank you so much for tuning into The Proof. If you haven't already, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. And remember, health is a daily practice, something that we get to continually practice over our lifetime, not a finish line. Corny, but true. See you next week, my friends. So the other day, I'm back in Los Angeles here, and I walk into this new cafe, and I said to this barista, I said, can I get a light roast? And she looked at me. She sort of glanced up and down and said, you literally have the smallest calves I've ever seen.